My name is Becky. My presentation is in English, and my presentation is HIV/AIDS in Mexico. So I'll just start out with the basics. So HIV is human immunodeficiency virus, which can lead into AIDS. So it starts out as an acute infection within 2 to 4 weeks after being infected with HIV. So during this time, the symptoms are flu-like, so you might not even know that you have HIV. And then the next stage is clinical latency, which is inactivity, but the HIV is still active during this time, and it reproduces at low levels, and it can go on for about a decade without any medicine at this time, and still the person that has HIVs may not even know that they have HIV. And the HIV virus will be attacking the T cells, and that's where the AIDS virus can be transmitted, or not transmitted, but that's where the AIDS will come in. And that's the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So HIV/AIDS started in the 1980s, and during this time there was a lot of discrimination against homosexual men and other minorities because everyone knew was that AIDS was transmitted mainly between homosexual men. And according to the UN, this is just kind of a fact to kind of show how big the problem is today even still. According to the UN AIDS program, an estimated 3.3 million people were living with HIV in 2007, with approximately 2.7 million people being affected in that year, and 2.1 million people losing their lives to AIDS in that same year. And this is an AIDS project. It's a quilt in Washington, D.C. So families can donate like a piece of a quilt of a loved one, and each year this is still ongoing. They donated to, I think it was like 2 people that started this project, and they kind of make it into this huge quilt, and they display it in Washington, D.C. to kind of show a visual representation. So, and that's kind of to spread awareness because at first no one was really showing the awareness that was going on. Okay. So to get on with my presentation, AIDS in Mexico. In Mexico, the estimated rate of people who live with HIV is less than 2 per 1,000 inhabitants. So when you look at that number, it doesn't seem like that many people, but when you break it down, approximately 160,000 people. So that's actually a lot of people. And then 90,043 people have been diagnosed with AIDS. So that's quite a few people. And then when you put that with other Latin American countries, that's actually a higher number in comparison. And then when I found in my research, problems such as poverty, marginalization, discrimination, violations of human rights, and lack of democratization have contributed to the spread of AIDS in the country. And then one huge problem that I found was stigma, and that's what I mainly focused on. And this is kind of hard to explain. And I found in 2 of my classes, the Spanish class I took with Ismael and my culture and AIDS class, we kind of explained it both, and it was kind of hard to understand the concept. So there are men that have sexual relations with other men but do not consider themselves to be bisexual or homosexual. And this concept is really hard to kind of grasp, especially because in our society we like to kind of box people in stereotypes, and so it's kind of hard to understand when you take this concept. And part of this can be due to the stigma, and also some of these men in other countries and also in the U.S., the men are married to women and have respectful lives, so they'll have sex with prostitutes and male prostitutes, and so they have like respectful lives. Like say they'll have jobs that they have to keep up with, and also they might be higher up in like say the social status. So having a homosexual or bisexual tag can carry a stigma, and so they don't want to be like outed in the community. And also this can include single men who refuse to identify as homosexual, possibly due to the stigma. But then there's also the argument that men who have sexual relations with other men who just see this as a leisure activity, that goes kind of with what I just said. So yeah, that's kind of a hard concept to grasp, but so when I kind of think of it, I just think of it as just kind of let the person identify what they want to be rather than letting society kind of identify them. And then I found a news article to kind of go along with this. In Mexico City, there was an individual who just identified himself as, his name was Eduardo. He obtained AIDS after he had sexual relations with another man. Sorry, I put men, but man. In the article, he stated that he was not homosexual and it was only a one-time thing, but later in the article, he made it seem like he had multiple partners, but he was still consistent with the fact that he was not a homosexual. And then he stated that he did not want his last name in the article because he didn't want others to classify him as a homosexual. So then, given that information, it kind of makes it seem like he was really afraid of the stigma that would be attached if other people knew the information because he didn't want his last name in the article. So it's kind of like he didn't want to be classified as a homosexual, and he kind of didn't want other people knowing what was going on either. And then, so with all this too, stigma and homophobia increases the isolation of gays, bisexuals, and transgender men, making them more reluctant to come forward to be identified and give advice. So with this, it kind of makes it harder getting help with AIDS because if a homosexual, bisexual, even a straight man find out they have AIDS and they got it even through having sexual relations with men, they may be more reluctant to seek help, or even if they didn't even have it, getting it through having sexual relations with men, if they got it through injecting drugs, they may not want to seek help because of the stigma attached to AIDS. So that makes it difficult. And that was just a video, but I'll just get through it. So how should we combat stigma? Education could be a huge thing. More programs in Mexico could help. And then one thing that I saw in my research is Mexico has started running campaigns against homophobia just because AIDS has become a huge problem there. And then with the more programs, Africa has a huge problem with AIDS. And at first they were reluctant to start programs, but the government realized that there was such a huge problem that they started educating the country about AIDS, and it's had a huge impact in the country. So that's it.